The New York Mets are hard at work building out their new coaching staff, and they've now made their first two hires.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the #1 daily podcast of the New York Mets. Want to find any of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now, before we even get into the start of the show, I want to apologize for a little bit of a later post than usual. I pride myself on getting this show together for all of you driving to work, and I dropped the ball on that today because, quite honestly, I just needed some sleep last night. Tried to do the show. I was too tired, and I didn't want to put out a show that was not up to typical standards. But again, apologies for not meeting my typical posting schedule. And now let's just dive right into it. Let's talk about these hires that the Mets made. I think if we had to summarize the two hires the Mets made in one word, that word would be analytics. The Mets brought in a new, not even a hitting coach, at least that's not what it's being called right now. It's a new coach to oversee the major league team's hitting program. It could be described as the head of the hitting department. So they're leaving some wiggle room to be able to potentially hire maybe outside the organization to bring in a hitting coach, which when you are hiring from another team, you want to be able to potentially give someone a job that is, an upgrade over wherever their current job is. So you have to maybe leave a little bit of wiggle room open if that's what the Mets are trying to do. Bottom line, though, is the guy that is going to be in charge of hitting for the big league club next year is Jeff Albert. Now, Albert has been with the Mets organization since the 2023 season. He's 44 years old. He was the organization's director of hitting. So he was in charge of instructing hitting throughout the entire system for the Mets. They're at the farm system, and he did even chip it a little bit at the big league level last year in September. He was with the club once the minor league season ended. So there is a little familiarity there with some of the veterans, but also this is a guy that was working with some of the Mets' top prospects. And I think if you look at the season ahead, I would expect that Jet Williams and Carson Bench would play pretty big roles in the Mets lineup, maybe not from jump, but at some point this season. And so it's good to have someone that's not going to be into this role as the head of hitting or whatever you want to call them that has that previous relationship built. And also a guy that has experience as a hitting coach. Albert joined the Mets again in 2023. That was after being the Cardinals hitting coach for 4 seasons. He had worked in the Cardinals minor league system for 5 years at the beginning of his career. Then he became the Astros minor league hitting coordinator, job that he held for multiple years while David Stearns was still with Houston, and eventually Stearns left, and eventually Albert ended up getting promoted to the big league staff in 2018. He was the assistant hitting coach, after the 2017 season, he was the assistant hitting coach. Then he ends up becoming the Cardinals hitting coach. I believe it was in 2019 was his first year of that job. And he was, again, the Cardinals hitting coach for 4 seasons. If you look at what the Cardinals did across his time as their hitting coach, 2019, they won 91 games. 2020 was shortened season. They were 30-28. Then 30-28. Maybe I have that. Maybe Baseball Reference is wrong. Doesn't even matter. Who cares? 2021, they won 90 games. 2022, they won 93 games. And they had a good offense through all of that. Particularly in 2022, Paul Goldschmidt wins the MVP. Nolan Arenado, I think he finished 3rd. You had Albert Pujols at 42 years old hitting 24 homers and having an OPS close to 900. They had a very good offense, and this is not like he was fired from the Cardinals job. They, in fact, would have wanted to keep him, but instead he chose to take the Mets job and head up the hitting department when it comes to the minor leagues for the Mets instead of remain as the Cardinals hitting coach. Now, I mentioned analytics. This is a guy that has a master's degree in exercise science and biomechanics, and was it Kinsey Let me get the exact. What does it say? His degree was in again. Master's degree in kinet. See, this is why I'm not the head of hitting. Kinesiology, I'm absolutely brutal with that. But essentially, he is an expert in biomechanics. Okay, how does the body move? And also, when you look at those Cardinals teams, one of the things he was emphasizing is pull side power, getting into that pull side power, because the most effective, type of contact in Major League Baseball is lifting and pulling, doing those two things. Now, does that mean that the Mets are just going to become a pull happy home run team? I wouldn't say that necessarily, but this is a guy that has experience as a hitting coach. He is experienced in the organization, and clearly the organization was happy with what he was doing in the minor league level. If you look at someone like Jacob Reimer, had a breakout season this past year. AJ Ewing had a breakout season this past year, but it even goes beyond that. Those are some of the guys that are on the verge of being top 100 prospects, or in Reimer's case, already is a top 100 prospect by a lot of outlets. But you have someone like Chris Suero, who had an unbelievable season. I mean, there's a lot of hitters in this system that are coming off a good year, and Albert, maybe gets the credit for some of that. So this is the move the Mets are making, and I think it probably informs the way they are going to potentially make their decision when it comes to the pitching coach as well. I said it, before they started this process, or at the beginning of this process, when they cleaned house and fired all their coaches outside of Carlos Mendoza and Antoine Richardson, and a couple of the guys that were invited to come back potentially pending the hires of these coaches. And one of those guys was, what's his name, Rafael Fernandez, I believe. Assistant Rafael Fernandez, who worked with hitters this past year. He was invited to return, so there is a chance that he will be one of the coaches, or maybe the hitting coach that works under Albert. Again, there's still potentially going to be more hires in that department. But when I was talking about the turnover, one of the things I mentioned was I really felt like when it came to the hitting and the pitching, you were going to see an analytically minded coach that was going to take over those posts, and they would probably lean more towards maybe the science behind coaching rather than maybe the long-term experience. With the bench coach, I thought there was a chance that we'd see another baseball lifer that kind of went a little more analytics. I mean, a guy that has been coaching for a very long time, but still a young coach who has an analytical background. So I want to talk about the Mets' new bench coach here in just a sec. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. There is nothing like being there in person to check out a live event, whether that's a concert, a comedy show, football game, basketball game, or when baseball season rolls back around, a baseball game. GameTime is the place to go to remove the tough part, the queues, the login screens, the surprise fees. All that takes the fun out of going to your game. That is why I use GameTime, because the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. GameTime, it's fast, it's easy, it's backed by the GameTime guarantee, meaning you're always going to get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. The app is made super simple. You can even view your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. And again, you can buy tickets in 2 taps. You're all set. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use that promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, take it, go. Download GameTime today. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. We are getting very close. Really do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, so let's talk about the bench coach hire. Not Carlos Beltran, as we had discussed on this show, not a former manager that was similar to John Gibbons, who has held that post for the last couple seasons. Gibbons, on his way out, said the Mets could use some youth at that spot. Well, they got some youth. 37-year-old Kai Correa is taking over as the Mets' new bench coach. Now, for the past couple seasons, Correa has been with the Guardians as their major league field coordinator. As we just see big league staffs getting bigger and bigger and new positions being created, the major league field coordinator for the Guardians was the director of defense, strategy, and base running. So he was in charge of the little things, and the Guardians were very good at the little things. They were a great team in 2024 this year. They had a great finish and were able to sneak into the playoffs. They had the third best defense in baseball by FanGraphs defensive WAR, fourth best in fielding run value, seventh best in defensive run saved. That's above average. They were more middle of the pack at 14th. But Correa was definitely in charge of a very good defense. And if there was one thing that the Mets were stressing at the end of the season, it was run prevention. And part of that was improving their defense. So I think Correa is coming in to spearhead that. It's almost like a defensive coordinator coming on board, but he's also going to be the right-hand man for Carlos Mendoza, giving him a fresh look. Mendoza now has multiple years of experience. The Mets feel comfortable with him leading the team without a John Gibbons around as a sounding board. Correa also has a lot of experience despite his age. He went right into coaching, had no professional baseball career, started in the college ranks, ended up with the Guardians, coaching in the minor leagues back in 2018. Then in 2020, he was hired to be Gabe Kapler's bench coach with the Giants, a post that he held till the end of the 2023 season when Kapler was fired, and they actually had Correa be the interim manager, but it's only for 3 games at the end of the season. Then Bob Melvin came in after Correa was up for that managerial job. He did an interview, but Melvin got the job, and Correa went back to the Guardians in that field coordinator role. But many around the industry view Correa as an up-and-coming managerial candidate, somebody that would have been considered for all of these vacant positions that are out there. The Padres job is out there at the Mike Schilt, and that's his retirement from managing or coaching, whatever it is. There is still some jobs that Correa could have potentially interviewed for. I can't remember. Did Bob Melvin step down for the Giants? I believe he did, right? Bob Melvin. Yeah, I think he did step down. So you don't know who that would have been. Could have gone back to the Giants. There would have been other jobs out there that Correa potentially could have gotten, but instead he is choosing to jump back into the bench coach role and to be the second man, the second guy in command, the second in line, whatever you want to describe it as, to be, again, Carlos Mendoza's right-hand man. So interesting hire for sure. I think, again, both of these hires scream getting more analytical, trying to really help the players understand and process the numbers and just be the most effective team that you can be. If you thought that the Mets needed to go more old school and get back to moving runners over and bunting and I don't know, whatever old school baseball you might have thought would have saved the Mets' problems and fixed their season last year, they're definitely going the other way. They're saying we need to get as analytically minded as we can. We need to be the smartest team out there. We need to put our players in the best position to win. And the best way to do that is to understand all of the science behind it, to understand all of the intricacies and technology and things that are out there that can allow you to win within the margins. I think that that is what these coaches are being brought in to do. Now, there's still other hires to be made. There still is a pitching coach is the big one. Still a third base coach that you need. You also need a catching instructor. Those are the 3 big positions that still need to be filled. And then you're going to have some assistants and all these other things that will continue to filter in the staff. Who knows? Maybe the Mets will get a major league field coordinator. So there's still a lot to be done. But what I want to talk about to close out the show is those big 3 posts, right? Third base coach, pitching coach in particular, and then the catching coach replacing Glenn Sherlock. Who makes sense for those roles? What can we learn from the hires that are made to try to inform us on what the Mets are going to do next? I'm going to go through all of that here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season's here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you're going to unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether you're into player props, building a same-game parlay, even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes watching football even more exciting. You got a little more something riding on the action. And with FanDuel, you can do exactly that. Whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the stats, FanDuel is going to make the game day experience so much better. It's quick, it's easy, it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service. You'll get updates from me anytime news breaks of the match. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways and a live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever going on social media. If you want to be Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, who will be the Mets' new pitching coach? If there's a guy that I have my eyes on now, they promoted their director of hitting. Why not promote their director of pitching? If they stay internal, I think Eric Yeagers will be their new their new pitching coach. It makes a lot of sense. He has been heading that pitching department for the same amount of time that Albert was heading the hitting department. Both of them came in 2023. Yeagers worked with Driveline. Then he became the pitching strategist for the Phillies in 2019. Then he joined the Reds organization as their minor league pitching coordinator in 2020, became their assistant pitching coach in 2022. And then in 2023, again, he took that job with the Mets. So Eric Yeagers, a guy I would look at. Desi Drusel is probably going to stay with the team. I would think as an assistant pitching coach, but that has not been confirmed or decided just yet. The Mets also could go outside the organization for this pitching coach. So that's the next thing here, trying to find the best pitching coach to replace what I thought was a very good pitching coach in Jeremy Hefner. Once they get that figured out, everything else will sort of fall into place. Again, they still need a third base coach. And when it comes to a third base coach, I still would love it if they got Ron Washington. But now that they have Kai Correa, who's going to be focusing on the defense, I don't know how. I mean, he's also your bench coach, but how much it would make sense to get Wash when that's his expertise, is being your defensive-minded coach. I still think that it would be good to have more of just an elder statesman on this coaching staff, and at the third base coach position, that might be the best place to do it. Maybe you don't need it. Maybe it's good to have a staff of a bunch of guys in their 30s and 40s, and that can be okay. Carlos Mendoza, how old is Mendy? I mean, Carlos Mendoza is not even that old himself. He's 45. So he's a year older than Albert. I mean, and then again, Kai Correa is 37. So it's going to be a young staff. And so I would like to see the Mets with the third base coach, maybe bring in someone who's been around a little bit longer. But I also am going to trust whatever the organization decides at this point, because they're the one that are interviewing these candidates. They're the one that knows what goes on behind the scenes. And so they're going to make the best choices for the Mets. So we'll see exactly who that third base coach is. As far as the catching coach, if I had to guess, I think JP Sabia is probably the guy who is going to take over that post. We'll call him JP because I clearly struggle with that last name. But he was the Mets bench coach and assistant hitting coach in Syracuse this past year. Was really credited with helping Francisco Alvarez get his season back on track when he made that little detour through Syracuse for a couple weeks there. It was JP that was working with him every single day, helping him get back to his fundamentals as a catcher and also helping with his swing. So if there's any coach that makes sense to be that catching coach who also can probably chip in with the pitcher or with the hitters a little bit, I guess a catching coach could chip in with the pitchers as well. But I think he really does fit the mold of what the Mets might look for that position. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way they went about it. If they ended up staying internal, bringing up Yeagers to be their pitching coach, bringing up Arsen Abia to be their catching coach, and then for the third base coach, maybe that is an outside hire. But who knows how the Mets are going to play it. That's where we're at right now in this process. The fact that they made a couple hires, I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to fill out this staff. And I'd assume they have all this wrapped up by the end of the World Series, where they're going to have their coaching staff in place so that when it comes to building their roster and doing all that stuff, they don't have to be, splitting their resources and doing multiple things. It can just be a focus on the offseason task. They have taken this opportunity with the time that they were afforded, not being in the playoffs, to go through a coaching hiring process. And I'm excited to see what the final staff is going to be when it's all said and done. Now, a couple more things before we close up the show. For one, just a little check-in on what's happening in the playoffs. The Dodgers look to be heading towards another World Series victory. They still are going to have to go up against potentially the Mariners in the World Series, and that's going to be tough. And we can't count the Brewers after 2 games. But what the Dodgers have gotten so far is just incredible starting pitching. Blake Snell, he went 8. Yeah, he went 8. And then you have Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who just throws a complete game, gives up a run. Just unbelievable stuff from those guys. and they still have Tyler Glass now. They still have Shohei Ohtani. They have a wealth of riches in that rotation. Roki Sasaki has been one of, if not their best arm out of the bullpen. Long term, he still should be a starting pitcher. So they really do have a lot of just great options, and enough of them showed up healthy in the playoffs that it feels that they're going to be able to just run away with this thing, which is kind of a statement for the rest of the National League. Like, if you're going to try to get past the Dodgers, you got to really build out a great team. And so the Mets, I think this is even more of a push towards being aggressive to add to the top of your rotation, because you got to compete with those guys. And it's going to be very tough to be able to match up with Snell and Yamamoto and Glass now and Ohtani in a playoff series, but you're not going to be able to do it with David Peterson and Clay Holmes and, even Sean Manaea. If that's your group, I just think that's not good enough. You got to go out and get a bona fide ace. You might need to get two really good pitchers if you want to compete with the best that baseball has to offer. And right now, that is the Dodgers. I was going to do, prior to the decisions the Mets made on these coaches, I was going to do a show today doing some mock trades, building off of yesterday's show, where I broke down 11 trade candidates that could help the Mets rotation. I want to take things in a little bit of a different direction. Instead of doing one show where I break down mock trades with 5 different teams, I want to focus a team at a time. So for tomorrow's show, barring any more news, I will do a podcast where I am the GM. I am David Stearns, and I am looking at the Marlins, and I'm going to identify different players that I think fit the Marlins that would make sense in a potential trade for Sandy Alcantara, and we'll even do one for Edward Cabrera, and we'll go through a potential package the Mets could send out to bolster their rotation. So it should be a fun show. I'm excited to do something a little bit different in that regard. So make sure you don't miss it. Should be, again, a lot of fun. Make sure you follow, rate, review, wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you want to be Locked On Mets Insider and be part of our texting service, go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets.